direction. Any direction you like. Hey, that looks good. Over there, huh? That's it. Let's die there.
It seems like a no-brainer to make a big screen movie based on a huge video game. But for a long time in the 90s and beyond, nobody seemed able to make a movie adaptation of a game that wasn't utterly risible. Not even a movie based on the biggest video game franchise of the early 90s was able to inspire audiences to pay money to see the 1993 movie Super Mario Bros.
Name?
Mario.
Last name?
Mario.
Super Mario Bros. Is a film with a terrible reputation, a very well-deserved reputation. Something that feels like it was made by people who watched their kids play the game for about 2 minutes, dismissed it, and then went back to the Times crossword. Super Mario Bros. Is a classic side-scrolling platforming game from the 1980s, where the player controls a plumber called Mario as he runs and jumps across multiple worlds, causing fatal spinal injuries to the Koopa Troopers, jumping across yawning chasms, all the while trying to get to the end of the level so that he can eventually rescue his various girlfriends who may or may not be in another castle. Or maybe Mario's not taking the hint. Depending on the game, he's rescuing Pauline, Princess Toadstool, Princess Peach, or Princess Daisy. You may play as Mario, but he is the real player. It's a Love Boat episode that writes itself, assuming of course that wasn't already the case. We'll come back to the who, why, and how later, but for now here's the what and the where.
Okay, what's your name?
Luigi.
Luigi?
No, Luigi Mario.
What if the dinosaurs weren't all killed off by a meteorite, but some were thrown into an alternate dimension? The Mario brothers are plumbers in Brooklyn. There's young Luigi Mario and his older brother Mario Mario. It sounds confusing, but his middle initial is also M for Mario.
Okay, look, how many Marios are there between the two of you?
There's three. There's Mario and Luigi Mario.
They're not doing well as plumbers in Brooklyn, but a chance encounter with Daisy, who's working on a paleontological dig, ends up with Daisy, her new beau Luigi, and Mario, along with some others, being transported to the alternate dimension where President Koopa rules Dino Hatton, or Koopaville, or whatever the hell you call it this week.
65 million years. We've been exiled here after the meteorite struck.
As for the story, Daisy has a bit of a meteorite fragment that Koopa wants. However, Mario and Luigi have lost it.
Where's the rock?
Koopa has a machine to de-evolve people. It can turn his humanoid dinosaur subjects into Goombas, or it can turn his two idiot cousin henchmen into even smarter idiot cousin henchmen.
Muster the Goombas!
Daisy turns out to be Princess Daisy, and her father is a big fungal ball that looks like a giant dripping ball of wax after he'd been hit with the de-evolving device.
Koopa's first victim of de-evolution.
This is my father?
The eternal question is, save Dad or get rid of unsightly leg hair?
Where is that meteorite piece?
The what?
Everybody wants that piece of rock. Even Mario and Luigi, who need the rock to get Daisy back, as well as Mario's girlfriend Daniela.
What's with this rock?
Once this rock is reinserted into the meteorite, our two dimensions will reunite and we will become one.
Then our cousin Koopa shall become ruler of both our worlds.
The lads have to try and retrieve the stolen lump of meteorite, then break into Koopa's stronghold, and then for some reason the Goombas start dancing. And then, well look, if your parents took you to see this when you were 6, this was possibly an awesome movie. But the rest of your family's likely going to disown you. The fungus that is Daisy's dad is everywhere. Luigi surmises it's somehow trying to help the pair.
It wasn't your driving that just saved us. That tunnel just sneezed us out, and then this giant booger caught us in there. That's what saved us.
Mushrooms have always been a big part of Mario games as power-ups, and throughout the film there are lots of little minor callbacks to elements of the games. Even Yoshi appears. It's a good-looking puppet, but it doesn't really do all that much in the grand scheme of things. A bit like when you put low-fat cheese on a meat lover's pizza.
You know what I'm talking about!
Koopa wants to merge his world and ours, which briefly happens in one scene for Koopa to appear in Brooklyn and devolve the local boss into a chimpanzee. By this stage, the film has clearly lost its focus, like the time I wore contact lenses coated in Vaseline. Well, lots of scenes happen. This happens. That happens. This happens. I look at my watch so often in the dark I drain the battery.
Goombas.
Daisy!
The rock.
The tower!
A short scope.
Whatever this is seems to do the trick. The gist is the Marios defeat Koopa and everybody else goes home, but Daisy elects to stay behind and learn who she is. Back in Brooklyn, the Mario brothers are hailed as heroes before Daisy reappears.
You're never gonna believe this.
Needing their help in what looks like an interesting, never mind, one and done.
A video game based on your many adventures.
What would you call it?
The Super Koopa Cousins.
Having managed to miss this film for so long, I've come into it with the expectation I'd be seeing one of the worst films of all time. Look, I did not see a good film. I did not see the worst film of all time. But I didn't see much of anything that made me think, oh yeah, this is a live-action version of Super Mario Bros.
You know, it just don't get no better than this.
That game is a colourful fantasy world full of clouds with smiles, clockwork, bombs, bullet bills, etc. This is an edgy, dumbed-down faux cyberpunk mess with a muted colour palette and clumsy plotting. Really clumsy plotting. Clumsier than Auntie Beryl's attempts to annex Tahiti during her summer vacation.
Are we dead?
Nintendo started off by making playing cards. They became a toy company and then, like many toy companies in the 70s, dabbled in video games. An early coin-operated game, Radar Scope, failed to sell, and the young designer Shigeru Miyamoto was assigned to rework the title into something that would sell. Donkey Kong was about a guy called Jumpman who had to rescue his girlfriend who'd been kidnapped by a giant ape. Isn't it always the way? The design of the character was dictated by what was achievable with the limited hardware of the time, which is why we have a guy in overalls with a big mustache. When Nintendo's nascent American operation was working on a localized version, they realized Jumpman needed a snappier name, and so they renamed him Mario, after their landlord. Donkey Kong games were huge for a while, and Nintendo made different versions and sequels and licensed home versions to every console going at the time. Universal Studios at one point had tried to sue Nintendo, claiming Donkey Kong infringed on their King Kong movie IP. But Nintendo had better lawyers. Mario was originally a carpenter, but the arcade game Mario Brothers made him a plumber and gave him a brother, Luigi. With the Nintendo Entertainment System came the side-scrolling platform game Super Mario Brothers. Even though Luigi only appears if you play the two-player mode where players alternate as Mario and Luigi. Maybe Luigi's sick and can only work part-time. I mean, he does look a little green. Ever since there have been new Mario games for each new piece of hardware. 2D platformers, 3D platformers, Mario sports games, party games, role-playing games, games focusing on Luigi, Peach, Toad, Yoshi, Mario's evil twin Wario, as well as whole other franchises based on Donkey Kong, fighting games in Smash Brothers, and racing in Mario Kart. Bits of story were added here and there, but even after decades of development, it's not a particularly deep or consistent lore. At the time the film was made, there wasn't much more backstory than any other product that you'd find in Toys R Us. Also, while we're on the subject, please read my print-on-demand 15-volume collected essays on crash test dummy lore.
Comes from sitting on my butt all day playing video games, that's why.
Rewinding back to the early 90s, the Nintendo Entertainment System was laying waste to video game competitors in the US and Japan. Everywhere else, Nintendo fans could go get f***ed. But Super Mario Bros. Was a massive phenomenon even where Nintendo's distribution was severely lacking. And so every man and his dog thought Mario could be a smash hit movie. Roland Joff was a name behind many an Oscar bait drama. He was the director of The Killing Fields and The Mission. But along with his producing partner Jake Eberts, he snapped up the rights to Nintendo's masthead franchise. At the time, Super Mario Bros. Seemed like it would have minted money like a payroll mishap at a factory making spearmint chewing gum.
Yeah, I bet.
The producers enlisted a pair of British directors, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, who'd created many well-regarded music videos in the early 80s but had made a name for themselves as the co-creators of Max Headroom, where they had directed the original short film that introduced the character. And then came the scripts. Lots of scripts from different writers who would darken the film, then lighten the film, then darken it again, then lighten it up again. At one point they had the writer of Rain Man. At other times they had the writers behind Porridge and Our Wiedersehen Pet.
These pipes have been service for years.
Later, a writer who'd done Bill and Ted. Very few of the people making this film had any intention of making something that looked anything like Super Mario Bros. The game. For filmmakers at the time, the Mario games were too slight a subject matter for films. They were a springboard, a jumping off point. Unfortunately, it would turn out to be jumping off into the abyss. Lip service to the donor franchise would later become a major bone of contention with viewers. But there was a sort of logic at the time. Joff had originally wanted something darker that wouldn't appeal to just kids. In the early 90s, we'd see many comparatively darker takes on colourful source material. Just as Tim Burton was determined to shake the spectre of the colourful 1960s television show with his 1989 Batman movie, a live-action Super Mario Bros. Would go down an edgier path. In hindsight, Super Mario may have worked better taking notes from Adam West rather than Michael Keaton. The upshot was, making the film this way was much more doable and friendlier on this film's budget.
I hate heights.
The world of Mario games was always shaped by what was possible with video game hardware at the time. Each new generation of hardware brought with it better graphics, which meant more detailed characters. Nintendo would eventually give up the hardware arms race and concentrate on profitable hardware while doubling down on their major franchises. As a result, Mario games basically look the same as they always have, just with incremental improvements. Characters have gained names, and there's a rough idea of mythology of what is now known as the Mushroom Kingdom. Of course, to make a film about jumping on floating platforms would have been very tough to pull off in the early 90s. So why bother?
What do you think I am, stupid?
Yes, but how are we gonna get up, huh?
Like Mario's.
The games as they were then were a very loose jumping off point, where the filmmakers wanted to tell a high-octane action film type story, and instead of cops we have plumbers, instead of crooks we have Koopas, and instead of a coherent plot we have scenes assembled in an order determined by a lottery.
You have let yourself go!
As time wore on, producers were becoming wary of the darker overtones of each new script they had received, and so new writers were brought in, and then more new writers, and new writers to replace those writers that had replaced the earlier writers. The idea was to lighten things up considerably, since they really did want the kids not to be put off by this film. Production was about to start, and yet more rewrites came in, which pleased almost no one, and so the script was rewritten again and again during filming, which caused much consternation amongst the cast, the crew and the directors.
What my brother is trying to say is he doesn't know what to say.
Also, with the sort of budget this film had, a one-to-one translation of the game would have been tricky to pull off. That said, hearing some of the filmmakers trying to articulate their thinking does have you thinking they're talking about a film set during the French student riots of 1968, rather than the tale of Luigi Mario trying to make time with Daisy. The film has its good points.
Strap your belt on, kid. We're going in.
It doesn't look particularly cheap. The production design, despite the fact it bears little resemblance to a Mario game, would have been pretty decent in any early 1990s kids movie that wasn't called Super Mario Bros. But the colourful world of Mario swapped for an early 90s edginess works about as well as swallowing a polo mallet to treat a headache.
Did I lie?
Most of the production was filmed on massive sets built in an abandoned cement factory in North Carolina. They had really well-regarded people involved with this film. Director of photography Dean Semler had won an Oscar for Dances with Wolves. Composer Alan Silvestri of Back to the Future and the Avengers fame gave us a fairly rote kids film score. Production designer David L. Snyder had worked on both Blade Runner and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. But all the talent in the world won't get you past badly thought-out scripts.
It's not good.
The film can't really make up its mind whether it's funny, scary, or silly, which is usually the same dilemma I have when I update my resume.
I am very disappointed in you.
Mario and Luigi in the games were famously dressed in overalls. In this film, the closest we get are boiler suits with colour patches that match the overalls, if you're drunk enough. The problem is, in order to watch this film, there isn't really any state where you can be drunk enough that doesn't involve an ambulance or a stomach pump.
And I just want to thank you for all your help.
Come on, Luigi. We're talking to the mildew in the shower next.
The ever-changing scripts contributed to a very difficult shoot that dragged on. Money was running out until Disney stepped in to cover the shortfall. Of course, they now want their say in the script, pushing for a lighter, more kid-friendly movie than the original conception. This film is just pulling in so many directions that the only winner was whoever supplied the tractors. The directors finished principal photography, but were frozen out of post-production for a time, while others helmed second units to shoot whatever was needed for the plot to make a kind of sense. Spoilers, the plot never really does make much sense. I've seen explanations of pre-decimal currency that make more sense. The film's momentum carries the script for the first few acts, but by the last half hour, the story really does fall apart faster than an ex-lease Range Rover. The film shoot was contained chaos, with everybody trying their best, even after many of them had come to the conclusion that they really had picked the wrong day to quit drinking.
I disintegrated. Am I still here?
Two people who didn't quit drinking, the stars. Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo reportedly drowned their sorrows in order to get through the demanding shoot, the constant rewrites, and the fact that they'd agreed to do this movie. John Leguizamo had managed to break Bob Hoskins' hand, and perhaps the trip to the emergency room was more fun than just being on the set of this movie.
Mario here brought me up. Mario! Scabelli's flooding the site!
We need your help.
Hoskins is Mario, or is that Mario, or is that Mario? Makes a solid Mario.
I'd call them the Super Mario Brothers.
It's a him, but don't pull his nose or he'll deck you. John Leguizamo, who was a young stand-up at the time, also brings to life Mario's brother Luigi.
I don't know, I ain't been to Manhattan in a couple of weeks.
Must have been a bad couple of weeks.
Also not terrible, Samantha Mathis as Daisy. She made for a good heroine/love interest for Luigi. Of course, she spends most of the film awaiting rescue until she gets help from Spike and Iggy. Fiona Shaw is Koopa's, I want to say jealous girlfriend Lena. I could look it up, but I don't care. The way she gets dispatched is a little grim for a film looking to hit big with kids.
Yikes.
Man, she sure makes an impression.
The big get was Dennis Hopper as President Koopa.
I'm about to lose everything. We can talk about this later, if later even occurs.
Dennis Hopper, the creator of Easy Rider. He took the role of a man evolved from a dinosaur seriously, spending much of the film walking like a T-Rex with its small-sized arms.
Guy in charge.
Egg sucker.
He was notably irritated on set by the constant rewrites, but soldiered on.
Pathetic. It gets worse every day.
Determined to make the best of a really bad situation.
I'd like the Koopa special.
Pterodactyl tail on that?
Yes. Dino, lizard, hold the mammal.
Lance Hendrickson appears out of nowhere as a favour to the producer. None of the cast is outright bad. In fact, the cast is one of the strongest elements of the movie. The makeup effects and animatronics are also worthy of note, particularly the nightmare fuel version of Yoshi. I mean, they look nothing like the thing they're originally based on, but that's the same with the Kardashians. I think that's enough trying to find the good in this film. I mean, finding a few gold coins after fossicking in a septic tank loses its luster after you remember you're fossicking in a septic tank.
Plumbers.
The film came out in 1993 with all the box office velocity of a Fiat Multipla in reverse.
I'd high-five you, but then you'd be an only child.
Reviews were, to put it politely, mostly negative, and while the film managed to get some people into the cinemas, its worldwide box office take was less than the film's budget. So that's a losing proposition. Most of the cast would disown the film. Hoskins in particular would single out the movie as the single worst job he'd ever taken. I can't particularly argue with that.
We got Mike.
That said, the target audience lapped it up. Those who discovered this in a video rental library or on television sort of liked it, and now there's apparently a bit of a cult about this film. I can't see it myself. There are far better films of the era made for younger audiences.
Guess we're both prisoners here, huh?
The cast of this movie did okay, but the directing duo's career helming major films was done. The stink of this movie cast such a pall over any movie adaptation of Super Mario Bros. That it would be another 30 or so years before another major picture based on Super Mario Bros. Was released. Mario and Luigi did eventually return to the big screen in animated form, in a solid enough film series that's relatively faithful, if not particularly amazing. But those movies did make more money than Scrooge McDuck during his insider trading phase. Even so, for this Mario film, it does have a good cast if they were in any other film. That doesn't override the totality of this movie, where it's very hard to recommend, whether it's for fans of the games, fans of early 90s movies, or even just fans of the trashiest tosh. If you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe, leave a comment below, or check out some of our other videos.